This is where business ideas and passions turn into profit. Napkin ideas are no longer tucked away in drawers, and women around the globe are turning their hobbies into million-dollar businesses. Welcome to Million Dollar Hobbies. Here's your host, world-renowned jewelry designer and Shop HQ celebrity, Victoria Wieck.
Welcome to another episode of the Million Dollar Passion Podcast. So you've heard me talk about this one topic over and over and over again, which is how do we all want this? How do we all do what we love and find a way to work fewer hours and still have all your career dreams come true so that you could enjoy the life and live the life that you deserve to live, not the life you think you have to live. And today I'm so excited to have a conversation with somebody who just did that. And not only did he do it, he did it in the category of business that's extremely difficult to kind of find, position yourself and get ahead, because, we're going to get into that a little bit about this, but he used to be a chiropractor, a full-time chiropractor. He still does this, if somebody needs it. But today he actually spends time teaching other people, coaching other people how to do exactly what he did, because he's found the formula for success. What I mean by success is not, fast fame and fortune and money, but about how to achieve your financial peak, at the same time, still enjoy all of the gifts of life that comes your way. Anyway, without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Vic Manzo, and welcome to the show.
Victoria, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I said a little bit about you being a chiropractor, but long before that, when you were first born, you're the most unlikely chiropractor I've ever met, because as you know, my father wasn't a chiropractor. My father was an acupuncturist, which falls into the same category, and he was actually the president of several different universities that taught that. It's a tough way to let people know what you do, especially if you're not in one of those big cities. People don't even know what a chiropractor actually is. Is that a real science, all that stuff. But most people don't realize, that's like a 4-year course, isn't it, after you graduate from college? Yeah. So it's a doctorate degree. And so you came from a very blue collar background. Your parents were not rich. They were not particularly hyper educated. So you somehow had to have some sort of motivation that was given to you, your DNA, or somehow you got yourself motivated to go in that direction. So tell us a little bit about from that beginning to how you achieved all that you achieved and what you do now.
For me, it was one of the things that always kept me moving forward was just seeing the suffering that was going on, right? The arguments that you see, because as a child, you don't pay attention to what people say. It's the reactions and the modeling that you saw. And so I saw this heavy presence and heavy attachment to finances, but we didn't experience that much of that. And so my parents lived paycheck to paycheck going through that. And for me, I kept my parents, maybe it was by design in some way, but my father always had me go hard work, lay carpet with him. And he's like, I'm going to show you what hard work's all about, so you don't do what I do. And my grandfather used to make me go work with him. He was very successful in business from a restaurant standpoint, but then he gambled all his fortune away. And so then he had to work, and he's like, I don't want you to be a dummy like me. So I got to see that. And so they were trying to teach me their lessons. And so for my life, it was always like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be something different. I don't want to go down that path. I've seen the emotional struggle. I've seen the limitedness, the fears, and all. I just felt it all. And I'm an empath. So I took it. I felt that even deeper. And for my life, I was like, well, what do I want to do? So I was always thinking the big stuff, a lawyer or an accountant, or maybe a chef. These are all these different things until chiropractic showed up and found me, because I used to be very big into health and fitness, and, did everything from supplements, exercise. My mom's a fitness instructor. And I was doing everything right at 19 years old, been doing it for 6 years. And then all of a sudden, my health just kept going lower and lower and lower. And long story short, I went to a chiropractor, back to the one I used to see when I was a kid, for a little bit. And within 3 months, I was in the best shape of my life. I felt absolutely amazing. And then that's where it all of a sudden sparked something. I'm like, what is this chiropractic thing? And right. I want to learn more about this, because I was like, how are you doing? I was telling the chiropractor, I'm like, you do this thing to me, and that's going to take care of the laundry list of stuff I have going on. And he's like, Yeah, pretty much. And I was like, I got to learn this. I got to understand this. And so that's where my drive came from there. And it's just, I wanted to be the best chiropractor that I can possibly be for whoever I'm serving, and just to continue to do that. And that was a drive that kept me going through my career to get to the levels of what I was doing and so forth.
So I'm going to just kind of unpack that just a little bit, because I am going to get into a little bit about how the work of chiropractic work is very similar, or the journey of it is very similar to entrepreneurship journey, because there are no quick fixes, right? You really have to take care of, you got to have a pulse on your body, you got to have a pulse on what's going on. And, you keep on tweaking, right? A lot of this is art and trial and error as well. There is a real well-proven science to that, but still, everybody is different. So your parents basically try their hardest, and they failed at many things. Your grandparents, a lot of people either failed, succeeded a little bit, and then they made one mistake and then they're living paycheck to paycheck. Your father didn't make a check until he was working with his hands, or his body manually. So you got yourself motivated, you get into chiropractic, and I'm sure you found out that chiropractic is, as much as you loved it, as much as you believe in it, as much as you want to go fix everybody drug free, there's such a resistance to the science of chiropractic, because I'm a huge believer of I've got, like, everywhere I go, I have a chiropractor on retainer.
Love
So like
that.
when I travel a lot, I've traveled like 4 million miles just within the last few years before COVID happened. And I kid you not, like when I go to Minnesota, I have a chiropractor there. Not that I actually feel like I need to go see them the minute I land, but if I ever got in trouble, I don't want to know if there was somebody there, rather than going to hospital there.
Hmm.
So I'm a firm believer in that, but I also know that just having recommended my chiropractors to other people that I know that suffer, there's such a resistance. A lot of Americans would rather get, surgery on their shoulders or whatever before they'll even try it, right? So it's kind of amazing that you somehow found your financial peak in that area. So that had to be really hard for you to build a practice and build your business in that chiropractic.
Yes and no. I mean, it was one of those things where to figure I would say this. I had to figure out what my message of chiropractic was, because there's just such a misunderstanding. I mean, if I go to someone and say, hey, let's say I adjust a newborn. This is what I loved in my office. You adjust a newborn, and they're like, patients will go, why does a newborn have to come here? And I'm like, well, what, you want the short answer or the long answer? And they're like, well, what time do you have? I said, I got like 10 seconds. So I'll give you the short answer. And so I'll tell them, explain how the brain is developed, how fast it grows and all that. I say, would you want that for your child to be on track, making sure it's developing the way it goes? Because symptoms may not show up, but there'll be things that'll be going on.
Right.
Or do you want to take it by chance? And they're like, I didn't know that. Wow, that's pretty interesting. But when you talk to an adult and mention chiropractic, the first thing they're going to think of is, oh, chiropractors just take care of low back, back pain, neck pain, and headaches. And what I used to share with my patients, and this is me figuring out my message of how I wanted to explain chiropractic. Because once I got authentic and congruent with myself, then all of a sudden I just set goals, and it was just happening because I was being true to me and what mattered most to me. And so I would tell people, chiropractic doesn't treat any illness, condition, symptom, or disease. Scientifically, we don't. And the reason why is because if I make an adjustment, how do I know that adjustment, no matter where I'm adjusting it, maybe the neck, lower back, how do I know it's really helping the lower back? Because I can make an adjustment at your neck and someone can regain bladder function, or a kid can get an adjustment at the mid part of their neck, and all of a sudden they're not peeing in bed at night anymore. There's no like one thing to one thing. And so a lot of times what happens in society, and this is mainly because we're so mainstream medical driven, is that we think treatments for everything. And chiropractic isn't a treatment. And right. So we don't do one-to-one, it's one-to-many. And right. So that's where the difference comes in. And when I started educating my community on that, they started to see how it was more related to health, just like working out, just like eating right, just like sleeping right. The more you do those things, the better your health's going to be. And the same thing came in with chiropractic.
So you were basically dialed in on your messaging, and you were being, I got to tell you, that's really, what you just said is really interesting, because a lot of chiropractors get so defensive and they don't really know how to explain what they do. And they don't like doctors, they just like talk bad about the medical community. And there's a lot of things that they do that I don't agree with, but still a lot of chiropractors are not clear on their own messaging. and they don't like really believe that their messaging is actually going to work. So you being brutally honest about what you do, what you can and can't do, I think that, and you're serving your community, even if they don't come to you, just by simply by educating, setting an example, that you were able to attract a certain number of, your target audience, and that's how you grow as your chiropractic business. Now, next thing I want to ask you is, so after you actually kind of hit what you thought was your American dream, which is to becoming making a living doing what you love to do, which is you became a chiropractor because you believed in it, and then you're at your financial peak, and yet you weren't happy according to your bio. So why weren't you happy?
I wasn't.
Why were you not emotionally fulfilled?
I wasn't fulfilled. I mean, it was one of the things where I literally looked at my wife and said, honey, we can have almost anything we want. We can enjoy what matters most to us. And I was shocked that this was it. And what really happened is I was conditioned to listening to other successful chiropractors telling me what success was. And so when I got to that point, I looked at my practice and I was like, this is not what I want. I not feel like I'm making a dent in the movement of healthcare and why I became a chiropractor in the first place. And so literally within a 6-month period, I was letting go of patients that just didn't fit the office anymore. And we took a 40% hit financially. But all of a sudden, what happened is I was like, this is where I want to go. And it was being a pediatric chiropractor. I wanted to get in the pregnancy and fertility, because women are so much in the food. When you talk about pregnancy, there's so much fear being in just into the mindset and the psyche of women. And it's like, like my wife's pregnant right now. And it's one of those things where, the stories that people will say are like, oh, well, we're going to have a home birth. And they're going, oh yeah, I wish the best for luck for you with that. Or the advice they give is like, you would never give that to someone who's starting a business or trying to heal for something, but for pregnancy, it's all this fear. And I was like, I want to be that person. And I don't care what happens. If we succeed, we succeed. If we don't, we don't. I'm going to go all in. I'm going to help out kiddos because their health is it's declining like crazy. And I want to be able to help make a dent in my community at least. And that's and we went to pregnancy and so forth. And I made that whole shift. 6 months later, we were breaking records in the office, and we were soaring back a year later to where we were, and we maintained growth from that point. And I was so less stressed. I was working less. It was amazing of the process, because again, I was coming back to what I said earlier too, is like, I was living my truth of what mattered to me now. What was a chiropractor to Vic Manzo? What did that mean to be a chiropractor? What was my purpose and what I want to do to serve at that level? And so we served about 50% pediatrics in our office, was kids just coming in, getting adjusted regularly, and making sure their nervous system's in alignment so they could show up being the best version of themselves.
It's really interesting you say this, because my granddaughter is 10 months old, and I went through this exact same thing. First, I'm gonna digress and backtrack a little bit for all of you who are listening to this message. Many of you have known me for many years, like 20, 30 years on TV. You may not have known that my father was a acupuncturist who believed in anything other than going to prescription drugs, surgery as the first thing. He was a medical doctor back home, but here's the thing. He used to always say, I don't understand why they call acupuncturists, chiropractors, acupressure alternative medicine. That should be the primary way you treat your body, because what's worse, getting a bad adjustment from your chiropractor or getting a bad surgery from your, surgery gone bad? It's pretty drastic. So don't you at least owe yourself to try to do, other methods? So here's a true story. We weren't, rehearsing or anything like that. But my granddaughter is 10 months old. My daughter went through a natural birth. She didn't realize she was all ready for epidural and everything else. But because she was so well prepped with her body and everything, by the time she felt like something moving, she thought, I don't know if I'm in contractions or not. And make a long story short, by the time they got in the car, got to the hospital, which was 20 minutes away, they were telling her she was like 5 centimeters dilated or something. So they actually took her in ER. She had the baby within like 30 minutes of it. Then they admitted her in the hospital. They didn't have time to actually give her admission forms. So she's like chilling out in her room with the newborn, healthy newborn. And the next day they came back, with like, oh, we forgot to admit you to the hospital. And here's your admissions form and here's a discharge form. But to make a long story short, my granddaughter, they told her that, most babies, a lot of people don't realize this, but most babies actually are born with their head one way or the other, favoring one way or the other. And her pediatrician recommended her to see some sort of a specialist for this. And they were going to actually recommend a helmet, like a $5,000 helmet for a baby. And of course, coming from my background, I said, questions, normal questions like, how uncomfortable is it for a newborn to be in a helmet, and does it sweat? What does it do? And they said, yeah, it sweats and it's quite uncomfortable, and you'll have some problems with, sleep. They'll have problems with sleep and all that. So I looked into alternative ways to fix this. So we found an osteopath. And we went to the osteopath once a week for about 4 weeks, and then once every other week for the next, month, and then once a month her head is perfect, literally. No medications, zero sleep. The kid still sleeps 12 hours a day, every night. She goes to bed at 6 p.m., gets up at 6 a.m. And it's really amazing, especially in the pediatric. What I wanted to tell you about the pregnancy, children, let's face it, marketing people, professional marketers know that fear is one of the most profitable businesses, actually. So, they sell fear. You go to a chiropractor, they might break your bone, all these things. When in fact, when you actually look at the real risks of, the treatments, surgery going bad, or you're not waking up from anesthesia, or or recovery going bad, all those things are much more drastic than natural ways of healing yourself. So so getting back to your story. So I see why you wrote the book. Your book is titled Rediscover Your Greatness, because here you were, you thought you were doing an amazing, business. You're an amazing chiropractor. You thought you've achieved the pinnacle of your success. Then you had to rediscover within that framework something that's even greater than what you were already doing. So is that when you wrote the book, or did you write the book after?
It was a couple of years after, where I kind of what you're saying, like I was looking at it of what really can help the greatness of individuals really thrive, and what does that look like. And I walked through and talk about the different fabrics of life, from the law of focus, or who are we really, how we're a creator, and how we choose our lives. And because of all the things I did in those few years before.
So basically, by shifting your focus and, going in the direction that you wanted to go, and wanted to own your chiropractic business and practice your chiropractic skills on your terms, on the people that you thought you would have the greatest impact, positive impact on. So basically, you went from working pretty much full time to working fewer hours, and you got absolutely more emotional freedom. But financially, did it also help you financially? Did you grow financially, or was it at a cost?
No, that's the thing. You think, when I was being a family wellness chiropractor, was always told you have to work weekends, you have to work at least 4 days a week plus a weekend and things like that. And so I started to build this confidence of like, well, I chose to do this pediatrics, and I canceled my weekends, and my practice grew. So I'm like, all right, so there's a law of least effort, which states anything in the world, anything in life, anything always has there's a minimum amount of effort to get the maximum gain. Now, that doesn't mean you can do more effort, but you're not going to maximize the gain. There's only a certain point that you're going to get to. That's what, for every effort that's created. And so I was like, well, what's the least effort I can do to keep my practice where it is, or continue to grow, and look at that. So we started looking at our hours, and we started to get really creative, and we're like, all right, where's the max? What's the times that I want to work compared to what I was told to do, or what most chiropractors do? And so, long story short, for the last 2.5, almost 3 years of my practice, we worked 14 and a half hours a week, which means I was in office 14 and a half hours a week. The average chiropractor works about 24, 25, 26 hours, give or take. And so I was almost half of that. And it was one of those things where at the same time, everything I continued my growth. I was still growing at least at a minimum of 10 to 20% per year, and from a profit side, not a sales side. And we never had a negative down year. And it was wonderful. We were breaking records still. It was just unreal. And even during COVID, where most chiropractors took hits of, 35, 80% roughly,
Sure.
we took a 40% hit, but we regrouped, recentered, and then we were breaking records in that year and continuing. So it was one of those things where, again, coming back to, and I sound like a broken record, but it really is what it was, being authentic to what mattered to me. And I'm all about what's the least amount of work I have to do to get the greatest game possible. And that's been my motto in my life of trying to figure that out. And so we did it with the practice, and it worked wonders.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the law of diminishing returns is real. So, it's real because I just explained to you very simply when they have this thing called the military apparently is a great place where they discover all kinds of experimental, scientific background there. So like if you were shipping something to QVC or HSN, and I'll make a piece of jewelry and they'll sell like 10,000 pieces of the same item. So, on any given month, I'll be on TV and we'll go through like 100,000 pieces of something. And what happens is when they do a QA control, okay, if you have 20 people checking the exact same piece, not 10,000 of the exact same piece over and over again, at some point, the first few hours are very productive. They catch everything, every single stone that's missing. But the next, after they hit about 8 hours, the next 10 hours, even if they go to sleep, the next day they come back, they don't catch everything. So they're almost better off that they actually randomly pick like 125 pieces randomly, like, you can just pick blindly and make sure that they check those. And believe it or not, they're more accurate checking the 125 pieces than having somebody check all 10,000 pieces. That's a real deal. And that's how most of these companies actually do their QA control. So that is what we describe the law of diminishing returns, because your eyes can't see the difference after a certain amount of time. So when you're working, a lot of times I think, and I know I speak to many of you actually have spoken to me personally, when after a speech or something, that you're exhausted. You're working. You used to work 30 hours a week. You used to work 60 hours a week in corporate. You leave. You loved it when you were working 35 hours a week. You didn't make enough money. You are now working 60 hours a week and making half the money, right? And you're still having to you're worried about whether or not your kids are eating healthy food or they're driving through a fast food thing with their dad. So you certainly have found a way to maximize returns where your efforts are at its peak, not by working too many hours, but working the right amount of hours. So you now have a path forward. And is that what you're sharing with your audience? And how do you help other people today?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because it's one of the things like where it's all about how working. You shared it greatly. And the same thing with the mind. I've done studies on peak performance in the mind and what it can handle. And a lot of times we think we just got to keep grinding things out. And what we know is that is so the opposite. And that was old research about muscles and, we challenge a muscle, it grows. So, and they started seeing similarities in the brain. So they're like,
Incredible Hulk by now.
Exactly. Right.
I don't understand why I'm this size now.
And what we know is that it's actually opposite. The brain likes rest. And in your heart, like for example, your heart, sure. We think, your heart beats all the time. It never stops. It never rests. But if you actually look at what the heart does, it actually only works 9 hours a day. Right. When you add up the time, it contracts and then it relaxes. It contracts and relaxes. And so the key thing is, the reason why I kind of shifted these gears is I wanted to maximize my energy in what I do, maximize my focus so that when I'm doing something, I'm 100% there. Because I may have worked only 14 and a half hours in the office. I probably worked about 20 hours a week in my business for just chiropractic. I did podcasting, had a book, I had another coaching business I was doing. But I was able to jump into each of those, and it was just that. And the more you can laser focus in and hone in, some people call this flow state. Some people in athletics call it the zone. This is a true place to be when you're really hyper focused on what you're doing. You have infinite energy. There's I can continue to go and go and go. And that's one of those simplest things, but it's knowing to really how can you break this up so you can manage your energy? And I teach a lot of my clients, and I share a lot of this stuff where it's about instead of doing time management, which is fine, that's good, do energy management. Where you can get the biggest bang for your buck, knowing where. So for me, I know I'm more effective when it comes to creative ideas and stuff first thing in the morning. All my good stuff comes in the morning. That's why I do it in the morning. In the afternoon, I'm doing more the stuff that I just got to get done. It's not like the good creative stuff. It's just like, maybe my socials and stuff like that. I'll get that stuff out then, just because I know how my brain works and I know what works for me. So this is something I share with my clients a lot, and I share with my and stuff is like, knowing your chronotype, knowing what, are you a bear or are you a, this looks at where your performance is going to be at most time. Like I don't work out in the mornings because I don't have the energy there. I can work out. I just don't I don't hit the levels of where I want to go in my workouts. But if I work out between 12 and 2, that is prime time for me, because I can go in, do a really hard workout, hit the numbers, break some PR, personal records, and really to go exert as much as I can. So it's just knowing how that works throughout your time and just knowing to put a little time. And so that's anywhere from, and so when you're doing mental work, anything like that, research has shown that it's anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours max peaks. And you just got to find what works for you. You got to play with this. You'll know because your productivity or your creativity starts to slow down, or you start to get a little tired or something like that. Then you hit your max and you start playing with this until you figure it out. Like mine's an hour and a half. That's what I know I can go the max with, and then I need to take a break.
It's interesting you say this, because I completely agree with you on that. I'm a very productive person in the morning. Like this morning I got up at 4:30 because I'm in the middle of writing my second book. I wrote a science fiction. I'm reading my second
Ooh, awesome.
And I got up, I wrote from 5 to 7 a.m. because that's when I'm most creative. But here's the thing. If I asked 20 entrepreneurs today, what's your most productive time? The truth is they really don't know, because you're too absorbed about your schedule and going with, what's on your calendar, what your admin, assistant tells you got to do. You're going until you just mentally crash. Right. And then you don't even realize, so the whole idea of taking an inventory of why you're here, what's your purpose in life, what are you passionate about, what impact do you want to have, what do you want to focus on, and what do you want to align yourself with, the belief system. And then also taking an inventory of your body. You got to understand, if you're a morning person, you probably are going to be most productive in the morning, and you want to do the most important things in your life when you're most productive. You know what I mean? I couldn't care less if I'm burning 200 calories or 20 calories. So I don't do that in the morning. The things that are, I love my science fiction. I presented it to a bunch of, publishers, and they all loved it. They asked me to write 3 books. So not only because they told me, but I just love the story and I wanted to write it. So I am willing to get up an hour earlier than I normally do and write between 5 and 7 a.m. no matter what. Right. So that, I think when you're talking about rediscovering your greatness, like your book said, you do have to have some inventory of what your skill set is. Why are you here? What your purpose is? What do you want to be? And how do you need to go, I'm here now grinding it out. I want to be over there. How do I get there? And part of that is really taking an assessment of yourself. And if you're not healthy enough to, have a full schedule, maybe you need to take an inventory of your health too. But I think just understanding what your strengths are, who you are, what your mission is. I think all those things, if you don't have that dialed in, you can't help other people. You can't serve other people in the way that's, that could be maximally affected by that. So I'm glad you shared that with me. Now, let me ask you, you wrote another book called A Walk in the Dark. What is that book about?
It's all about the darkness that we face in life. That's obstacles, challenge, traumas, whatever that is. And the whole purpose of the book was really to end mental suffering. But the purpose of it is to embrace the darkness and actually see it as a teacher, and actually see the wisdom that it teaches us, and have a different perspective, rather than thinking, oh, this isn't good, or I had this happen to me in the past, and we resist it, which only affects our mental health and also our physical health and so forth. And to be really just to have the dance of life, return people back to that, so they can understand that while this challenge may be showing up, or maybe this hiccup showed in my life, but you know what? Dr. Vic said in that book, the universe is always there to support us in every step of the way. It's always there for the good. Everything's always a win in life. So how can that be a win? And then if you just ask that question, how can this be a win? You'll start to see that things will start to show up. If you truly believe it, it will start to show up, and you'll be like, wow, you know what? Like, if one of my friends was sharing a story about how he had a flat tire, and he goes, most people would be upset about that. But he goes, all of a sudden I had someone call me I haven't talked to in years. And guess what? I'm waiting for someone to come. I had a great time to be able to just have a conversation. He goes, if I held myself being frustrated, my conversation with that person, I wouldn't have time. But if it was, I'd have been complaining and this. And instead we were reminiscing about life, and I haven't talked to him in a while. We talked about how we haven't seen each other, and now we're getting together next week for lunch. And it's like, if you just had that shift, you would have known that, wow, there's something always good coming out of that. And so that was the main purpose of the book.
You know, I love that. I love the title of the book, and I love when you explained what's in the book. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate the thought of embracing the darkness, because, you know, without the rain, you won't have a rainbow, right? Without the rain, you won't have a rainbow. And I think that darkness, you know, I personally, it's a very Asian thinking, believe that a certain amount of darkness is actually given to you. It's built into your life so that you could learn and so that you could grow. And if your life never has any challenges, you don't have a dark day at all in your life. Number one, it would be pretty boring, first of all. And secondly, I just believe, and I know you believe this too, based on your own background, it's all those dark moments that you've survived, that you've endured, that sort of shaped your future, you know, and only because you embraced it, only because you didn't resent your father for working, you know, being a manual laborer, or maybe your uncle or some grandfather telling you, hey, I lost all my money, don't be like me. You embraced what they were telling you, you learned from their mistakes, and you learn from, you know, watching other people suffer that you didn't want to suffer, and you were looking for a pathway out of that. And so I'm just so happy that you came on this show and, you know, shared your story, your journey. And I'm excited to see many of you go and check out Dr. Manzo's website. It's empoweryourreality.com. So it's empoweryourreality.com, all one word. Um, just so that as we close this episode, if you were to give somebody who just started a business, or who is in the process of, you know, starting a business, like they're in that transition period to a side hustle, what advice would you give them?
It's the thing I share with my clients when I start working with them on day one, and that is, you got to create your vision. What's your vision that you see in your life? What is that? And I mean your overall life. And the reason why I say it like that is because if you can be everything that happens, success happens because we're congruent with something. When we don't have congruencies, we have blockages. And when you have blockages, it's going to be a really hard battle to get up there. And so when you have crystal clear in your vision of what you are being here in this world, like mine is to raise the consciousness of every human being I can come in touch with. So all the work I do, from every element of what I do, aligns with that. That's why I write books, because I want to help elevate the consciousness of human being. Why I was a chiropractor, I want to elevate the consciousness of the human being that I'm working through the art of chiropractic. Being a business mindset coach, well, mindset's pretty much everything. The mind is all ends and starts at. That's why I kind of do those things. So when I have that, that is the one thing you want to get so crystal clear. And a lot of business people miss that. They hear about, I was a business major, and it was like, we heard about vision statement, we heard about vision, but it wasn't that. We got the mission and we talked about what to do. And I really believe, and I've seen the radical change in my life and others, when we can get crystal clear on vision, you are starting to utilize the universal principles and the laws and how to interact in so many different ways. Quantum physics supports this too, that you make the path a little easier. Because now when you make choices, if it's not aligned with your vision, well, you're not going to take it, because that's a distraction. When you have a shortcoming coming up, you're not going to let the negative energy come in so much, or lower vibration emotions, because you can stay centered to the vision of what you want to create. And that's what the billionaires that I've studied done. Like Elon Musk is one of the prime examples. And it's one of those things where if you can just have that, that will set the tone for everything else.
Yeah, and everything. So just get clear on your vision, and that kind of directs all your efforts, all your thinking, all your mind, body aligned with your vision, because that vision is sort of the end goal. That's, if everything hits the right way, that's what you're going to end up with. So that's really important that you start with that, not something you're going to stumble into, because you're going to stumble into a lot of other things before you get to the end. So again, so Doctor, can you share how other people can get a hold of you, and when they get to you, what they can find on your website?
Yeah, the easiest way to get a hold of me and find me on the social media and everything is at my website, empoweryourrelly.com. At the top, you'll see all my socials that I'm connected with, my podcast, my blog. I got some freebies on there. I got a book on the power of visualization, sharing some science on how the mind can actually change matter. I share some studies in there. And then you can contact me through there and so much more.
Yeah, and don't forget about the 2 books that he's authored. The first one is Rediscovering Your Greatness. I love that. I think everyone should be. First of all, I believe everybody is great. You just have to rediscover your unique greatness. Because believe me, you do have greatness that you can share. So Rediscover Your Greatness and A Walk in the Dark by Dr. Wieck Manzo. Thank you so much for coming on. And for those of you who are listening, please go ahead and subscribe to this show. And if you haven't shared it already, please share it with at least one other person so we can amplify and elevate our message out there. And until next week, please stay happy and healthy. And remember, happiness is a choice. And I hope you make great choices this week.
You've been listening to $1 Million Hobbies, where we turn dreams into reality and passion into profit. According to ancient Chinese proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Congratulations on taking that first step today. For more information on how Victoria can help you turn your hobby into $1 million and to download Victoria's free ebook on passion-based business ideas, visit $1,000,000hobbies.com. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast player.